Good afternoon. My name is April Smith. I'm the Education Coordinator here at NAPA. Welcome to the Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar series, Best Practices from Green Fleet Award Winners. Before I turn things over to our presenters for today's session, there's just a few housekeeping notes to review. This session is being recorded, and a copy of that recording will be made available in the coming days. All participants are muted during the presentation to limit background noise, but we do encourage you to ask questions and add comments using the chat and Q&A features. You can find these on the Zoom toolbar. If you experience any technical difficulties, please reach out to the NAPA team through the chat feature. And now to kick things off, it's my pleasure to turn things over to John Bonnets.
Thank you so much, April. We're very grateful for the collaboration with NAPA. And welcome everyone to the Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar series. This session is on best practices from the Green Fleet Award winners, the 2024 award winners. We have a wonderful panel assembled for you here today, and let's just get right into it. First, we want to express gratitude for our sponsors that allow us to do this work and leverage additional grant funds for our work. And also want to make sure that everyone is noting the next webinar will be on electric vehicle battery reuse and recycling. That's on October 2nd. We'll give you another opportunity for a QR code to register for that webinar towards the end. We also would like to encourage you to save the date for the August 25th through the 27th of 2025. Our next conference and expo will be in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We had a great turnout this year in Durham, and we're really looking forward to this larger facility in Winston-Salem because we're just busting at the seams in Durham. So hope you'll join us. Now I'd like to give time to Leolu Adeola from Leke Services, one of our sponsors.
Thank you so much, John, and hello, everybody. It's great to be with you today. My name is Leolu Adeola, and I am the founder and principal of Leke Services. At Leke Services, we partner closely with transportation and logistics leaders like yourself to advise and equip you to take on the challenges that come with reducing emissions. As many of you must know, right, our industry is responsible for nearly a quarter of global emissions, even though that varies from year to year. And as someone who has been fascinated by transportation my whole life, right, and I'm deeply concerned about the climate crisis, this statistic has been a personal call to action, and I believe we all have the power and agency to take meaningful action to protect our environment. I am honored to be sponsoring today's session and to be exposed to our award winners and to learn from their lessons. So first, a bit about my journey. I've spent nearly 15 years in transportation, pursuing opportunities across the ecosystem to develop a holistic understanding of how everything works. I built vehicles at Navistar or International Trucks, helping improve fuel efficiency. I've led strategy for electric vehicle development, raising over $2 billion in research on that topic. I've advised leading corporations globally on fleet management and battery technologies. And all these experiences have left me curious about a few things. One is, what will it truly take to shift an entire industry towards lower emissions, even zero emissions? And then how to do so at a scale that affects and improves everyday lives, right? Moving people and goods to determine how groceries reach our communities and our homes. Next slide. And this is why I'm excited to be here today. I know many of you are deeply committed to advancing sustainability in your regions and your communities, and I'm eager to learn from the award winners about the steps taken, the challenges faced, and the different creative innovations that you've made to solve these problems. I also know that some of you are just beginning your journey to reduce your fleet's emissions, and whether you've started with a small pilot or you're grappling with the complexity of the next steps, I want you to know it's very normal to feel stuck. And navigating all the bottlenecks from charging infrastructure, the bureaucracy around incentives, the government policy action. And as both an engineer and as a strategic advisor, I understand all these difficulties and know that finding a clear path forward, especially when the landscape is so unpredictable, is very important. I know particularly in the Southeast United States, right, there's been the rise of the battery belt, with North Carolina really leading the charge, achieving that 80,000 EV milestone 2 years or a year ahead of schedule. But there's still a lot more work to be done across the region to make sure fleets take lower emissions very seriously. And this is why my team at Lake A Services launched Fleet Electrification by Lake A Services as a flagship offering that helps your fleet evaluate and choose the best path towards reducing emission, with a primary focus on electrification. Meanwhile, acknowledging that there are other technologies out there, and electrification might not be the answer for you today. We empower fleets by taking to evaluate the total cost of ownership by taking into consideration different factors like powertrain technology, the energy and grid connection requirements, materiality assessment reports from your clients, and much more, to give you the confidence and clarity to move forward in light of different incentives and financing options. Through our exclusive partnership with BrightMerge, a partner of us that is an emerging data platform, we will design a real-time dashboard to help you monitor the KPIs and make sure the transition does not cause harm to your regular operations. And we know your customers rely on this. So even though you got to reduce emissions, you got to make sure that you can deliver your goods and services on time. And like I said, if electrification isn't feasible, we look at other alternative fuel options like propane, biodiesel, and clean fuel technologies, even hydrogen, to help you keep moving forward towards your emissions targets. Next slide. So we'd love to help you get started with a free plan to help you that will go so far to understand the technical and financial and operational needs to fully electrify your fleets by providing us with information around your fleet size, the typical average mileage, the class of vehicles in your fleet, typical idle time to simulate when charging makes the most sense. And all of this can be done by filling out a 30-second survey on our website. And from there, if you choose, we can work together to develop a comprehensive transition plan in just a few weeks that would include identifying the right vendors for the transition and getting your team ready for changes to the daily operations. Go to the next slide. And as you consider how to move forward, right? And this is as much for me as for you, as we listen to the award winners today. I'd like you to consider some of these questions. Where could your fleet be if you took action today or tomorrow? Where are you seeing the most friction or pain points with the transition? And what would you do differently if you knew the cost to reduce emissions? For those of you who are already electrified, Lake A Services also supports fleets throughout the electrification life cycle with working to develop certifications and dedicated audits that help you optimize the journey. And so if you go to the next slide, that's it for me. I'm very eager to hear about the winners today and the actions you've taken. To get in touch with me, you can schedule time directly, use this by scanning that QR code, or just go to our website at lakea.services/fleet to get your free plan in your inbox. And for those of you who would be at the Fleet Forward conference in November, I'll be a panelist on the main stage talking about the EV State of the Union. And that's conveniently scheduled right after the election, which we know is going to determine a lot of what the future of our industry looks like. So I'm hoping to hear from you soon, and thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, Laolu. Rick Sapienza.
Great, John, thanks. I'm going to take over from here. And as John said, this is best practices from the Green Fleet Award winners of 2024. Both NAFA and the Clean Energy Technology Center, go on something I worked with for a while in terms of, the objective is to develop a community of like-minded transportation professionals to exchange ideas, share lessons learned, and drive the integration of technology and drive efficiency in transportation and in fleet. I'm now with Wake Tech. I think John mentioned that. on the DITA Transportation Technologies. Our speakers today, we have Scott Stevens from Miami-Dade County. Scott is the Fleet Operations Support Manager of the county's Internal Services Department Fleet Management Division. He's got over nine years with the agency, where he manages critical operations across 20 repair and 29 fuel facilities. His expertise includes implementing fleet and fuel management systems, environmental policy, and project management. Before Miami-Dade, Scott served 11 years in the U.S. Navy as a nuclear machinist mate and surface warfare officer. His military experience deeply informs his disciplined approach to fleet management and emphasizing efficiency and strategic planning. And after Scott, we're going to hear from Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, Jennifer Long, the Deputy Director of Operations Services. Jennifer also has actually substantial military background, and currently as the Deputy Director focuses on fleet management. Her role primarily involves enhancing operational efficiencies and implementing sustainable practices across the organization's transportation fleets. Jennifer's leadership and expertise are pivotal in steering the Port Authority towards a greener and more efficient future, leveraging her 3 decades of service to instill rigorous standards and innovative solutions in fleet operations. And then lastly, Keith Kerman is the Deputy Commissioner at DCAS, Department of Citywide Administrative Services, and New York City's first Chief Fleet Officer, serving 50 agencies, including NYPD and FDNY, and Department of Sanitation in New York City. New York City is the nation's largest public fleet with 28,000 plus units and $1 billion in annual expenditures. Staff of 1,800, nationwide leader in fleet EV adoption, charging, telematics, biofuels, zero, shared services, and more. Keith is leading fleet efficiency, safety, and sustainability initiatives under Mayor Eric Adams. And Keith has definitely been recognized for his years of service and the quality work he's done in public fleet. He's got a number of accolades to his name. Before we move on, I was one of the judges for this contest, and just want a quick overview, and this isn't all inclusive, some of the commonalities of the top fleets. I mean, the thing we noticed, and you'll see with the fleets that present today, a comprehensive approach with the tools and strategies across the facets of operations, alternative fuels, integration of technology, telematics. Data and information has become king in fleet, and the use of data to understand your operations and to make informed decisions is integral. Establish goals by these organizations with the policies and procedures that support these goals. Along with that, support and involvement across all levels of the organization. And one other, I guess we'll call it a general one, is just a culture of learning and continuous improvement overall. And then I do want to highlight one other thing. Some of the challenges we asked the fleets, what are the major challenges you face in becoming a green fleet? And they're fairly common, and I bet you most folks could rattle them off fairly quickly. Budget and financial considerations, integrating these technologies and making these changes. It's not free. In a lot of cases, significant upfront CapEx. So support there is needed. The infrastructure, and that's on a number of levels. Software and compatibility, just getting the units in the ground to support your transition. Required upgrades and power requirements. Talk about change, just the logistics of change, and then the organizational aspects of changes, getting buy-in from your folks, and leading the charge and getting the education to do it right. The availability of the equipment, the lead times, the vehicle types to do the job with the new technologies, where especially light duty is seeing quite a bit of progress over the last handful of years. And now we're looking toward the medium and heavy duty in some cases. And that's, there's others, but there's some highlights. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Scott Stevens take over with Miami-Dade and talk about, what they're doing, what's been successful, some of their lessons learned, and, definitely there'll be tidbits throughout that'll help others.
Appreciate that, Rick. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So if we go to the next slide, John. So today I'll be talking a little bit more about what you do to drive yourself to sustainability. Sustainability it's more than just electrification of your fleet. It's fuel diversity, it's technology diversity, as Rick talked about. It's a mixture of many different things. For example, do you have biodiesel, compressed natural gas, liquefied natural gas? There's propane, renewable diesel if it's available to you, E85, depending on where you're at in the country, and dare I say, maybe even hydrogen. But today, what I want to focus on, at least for Miami-Dade County, is how we've been driving to sustainability through electrification. Next, please. So who are we? This is Miami-Dade County. We're the 8th largest county in the United States by population. Our government's made up of about 32 departments. We have a little more than 27,000 personnel employed. For the fleet, we are made up of more than 14,000 vehicles across those departments, ranging from anything, the whole gamut. We got golf carts, ATVs, all the way up to large landfill and construction equipment. And here in Miami-Dade, the transportation sector makes up nearly 55% of all our greenhouse gas emissions. And being at the tip of the continental United States here, we're kind of ground zero for everything that has to do with green studies, whether it be sea level rise, it's ground zero. So everything that we do here is very impactful. Currently today, we have 346 electric vehicles in our fleet. As of the last 2 years, we went from 8 to 346. And we have another, I believe it's 100 and I think it's 29. Yeah, 129 on order in the process of either being delivered or being built. So probably in the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be at 475 in our fleet, which is pretty good. And we've projected out over the next 5 years, our fleet should be somewhere around 800 vehicles, electric vehicles out of those 14,000, which is pretty significant in a 5-year time frame. Next, please. So how do we get there? What were the things that we had to consider? For us, we have something here called the Climate Action Strategy. I'm sure many of you have some sort of, legislation or mandate, hopefully, within your organizations to talk about going more green or being more sustainable, especially on the fleet side of things. In our case, our mayor is very passionate about that, Mayor Danielle Levine Cava. And she gave us something called a climate action strategy, which was an all-encompassing plan to help us get there. And one of the things that we saw was electrifying our fleet very quickly on the light side of things was very attainable. So what were the things once we got mandated to do this back in April of 2021 that we had to consider? The costs, Rick talked about a little bit. There's cost involved. These vehicles are a little more expensive than a conventional ICE vehicle. And then also you have to take into consideration your facilities, where they're going to park, where they're going to charge, what's the age and the plans to replace those facilities and the vehicles for that matter. Do you have the capacity at those facilities? What type of power do you have? Can you do level 2? Is there a possibility to go up to DC fast charging? And then what are the costs to upgrade any facilities that may need electrical upgrades? Those are all things that we have to consider when we're starting to go down this path. And then the baseline is, how do we pay for it all? Where's the money coming from? Has budget got involved? Are there grants out there that you could take advantage of? Are there any vehicle incentives out there that you could take advantage of in some way or shape or form to try to offset some of those upfront costs of the vehicles? And on top of that, what are you doing? Are you buying vehicles before infrastructure? Or you can go to the next slide. Or are we putting the cart before the horse? So you would say, maybe we are at a point to where we're buying vehicles and have no place to charge, and now we have to scramble. So those are things to consider. And then the next part is, once you've made those considerations, what's the plan? How do we unlock that door to electrify? How do we get buy-in? I would say for anybody that's in fleet, or anybody that's in whether you're a driver, an operator, or a fleet manager, or an executive director, or a deputy commissioner, you're the key. You have to sell. I'm not anybody of any significance here in Miami-Dade County, but I have a voice, and as a operations support manager, particularly a fuel manager, my buy-in and my sales goes someplace. It helps. So the next part is any plan is who, what, when, where, and how. Who wants this now? Is there anybody in your organization that is, hey, yelling, we need to electrify? If they are, that's your person. That's your person. Bring them into the fold, whoever they are. Engage, ask. You might be surprised at who is already wanting to do this thing. It could be someone as high up as your mayor, commissioner. It could be just your driver that already has an EV at home. Those are the people that can become your sales force to start pushing this thing, getting the word out. And then identify your constraints and get creative. That's the what part. What are your constraints? How can we get creative? Is there anything that we can do to offset some of the costs? Like here in Miami-Dade County, for instance, we've partnered with our local energy provider, and we actually have a plan in place and a partnership to offset some of those infrastructure costs over time, with a lease to own of the infrastructure. If we're having to put in a microgrid, or in our case, like at our downtown facility, we're putting in level 3 charging, but we didn't even have 3-phase power. So that's very expensive, but by offsetting that cost over time, it becomes affordable. And we did a master services agreement with our local energy provider, and it's been very, very beneficial so far. So spread it out, partner, get creative. When can you do it? Are you building out your infrastructure first, then buying your electric cars? Or more than likely, you're probably doing a combination of both. I would think most of us probably have to buy and then figure out the charging aspect on the back end. And if you have to do that, again, those creativity things come into play. Are there grants out there for infrastructure that you could partner with and maybe do a public and private facing dual purpose electrification? That helps. Then the other part of it is, where are these things going? Which vehicles are getting replaced? Where do they park overnight? Is it a take-home vehicle? Is it a 24/7 vehicle? What vehicles can you electrify? Where can you when can you electrify them? And then where are they going to be housed to get their charging? All that has to be considered. And then the last part of that is the how. Getting with your team, figuring out where you're going to place these chargers, what type. Use your data. If you don't have an FMIS, a fleet management information system, and you're on spreadsheets, figure it out. Get into your data. Start looking at your miles traveled. Start looking at the things that will help you. And there's companies out there that can help you with consulting to do these studies for you if you have data and you can afford that. We did that here in Miami-Dade County. I'm an army of one when it comes to analytics, so I needed help. Reached out, found somebody that could do this for us. The price was reasonable, and they helped us analyze our data, get us at least started down the path for that first initial phase in of electrification. Next, please. So that's really all I had. I didn't want to take up too much time. So that's my email. If anybody has questions or ever wants to reach out, I'm available. Thank you.
Scott, thank you. Good points with integration of technology, use of data, and change management. And next we have Port Authority, New York, New Jersey. Long relationship with Port Authority. They're almost a fleet laboratory. They embrace technology and try a lot of different things. So I've used them as a sounding board to understand what's coming and how it works a number of times throughout the years. Jennifer, all yours.
All right, thank you, Rick. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, very often when we start, people don't really understand what Port Authority is. So I thought it would be great to just take a minute to let people understand when people hear the term Port Authority, what that actually means and encompasses. So, it's a bi-state agency that was founded in 1921. And it has, we encompass a region of roughly 1,500 square miles. And some of the things that we have in our multimodal facilities in the region are, aviation. We have the 3 major airports. So you've got Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark International. Ports, we've got 2 ports. We've got Bayonne and we have the Port Elizabeth, largest seaport on the East Coast. And then tunnels and bridges, the famed George Washington, the Lincoln, the Holland, all part of Port Authority, to include the bus terminal. So we've got, we even have a train railway, right? So we have the PATH train system that comes through, and then last and most notable is the World Trade Center, right? So all of that is what encompasses there. So, Port Authority, where we sit in Central Automotive is really in the support side of the house. We have to support all these stakeholders with vehicles. And that means we have over 3,000 pieces of equipment. Much like Scott, we have everything from lawn equipment to very complex snow removal equipment that's used at the airports. So we have a very diverse fleet. So it's, with, across all the port district. So can you give me the next slide, please? All right, so just more of our construct here. We're cradle to grave. We do everything from, engineering of the vehicles and what's needed to do the jobs. We've in recent years embraced in telematics and using telematics as, predictive analysis and how we're using our fleet currently to predict how we should be using our fleet in the future. And and then also collecting that data as we electrify, how the vehicles are used, how many hours. Like Scott had mentioned, you have to understand your fleet, because when you get into the charging piece, is the vehicle only used 2 hours a day or 10 hours a day? Is it only used 2 days a week, or is it used every single day? So it depends on how you're going to how many charges you need, what charging cycles you're going to need to put them in. Is level 2 going to be okay, or are we going to really need level 3 chargers? So all of that starts to come in. So we have seven shops across the Port District. Most of them co-located at our major facilities. And then the last piece is at the very end, stripping down the vehicles and sending them out for disposal at the end, for sale of either scrap or, for a continuing life. But that brings us into electric, where we have to start considering the more complex environment of what to do with electric vehicles when they hit the end of life, right? So those are the discussions now that we're starting to have here at Port Authority, is about end of life and what that looks like and how we're going to start to align ourselves for that. And how long are we going to keep those vehicles in service? Ideally, what's the target, range for the best life expectancy? Next slide, please. Okay. So when we talk about fuel composition, what are we using right now? And one of the things we were able to embrace in the last year, and really at a rapid pace, we took it in as a pilot project and we've quickly expanded through it, was the use of renewable diesel versus the biodiesel we were previously using. We found renewable diesel, given the unique characteristics and operating environments that we're in, was far more stable and gave us a very short-term boost in carbon reduction, right? Without changing equipment or modifying any fuel systems or otherwise, being able to switch directly in and have renewable diesel placed into our tanks to operate. We were able to say, for the heavy fleet, we were able to begin to immediately see results in carbon reduction. We have flex fuel vehicles. We still can use traditional gasoline. However, one of the future things that we're starting to talk about here internally, and we're experimenting about bringing in, is isobutanol as a possible gasoline substitute. And we're curious to see how that's going to play out soon. We're using solar where we can to power our vehicles and use them as charging heads. We got hybrid, PHEV, and BEVs. That's, as our fuel composition. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So some of the vehicles we have in service right now, we have, everything from an attenuated truck to the Mach-E's, Chevy Bolts and Sonatas. On the stuff that we have on order, we're trying to, is now some of the heavier equipment is now coming into play. We got road sweepers and garbage truck coming in. And Blazers, Chevy is producing now Blazers, as well as Chevy Silverados, which is is just welcome supply for us to hit our 100%. That we're looking, light duty, non-emergency vehicles by 2028. So 100% by 2028 is the goal for Port Authority. And so right now we're sitting at 40% of that goal by end of year. So we should easily make 50% on light duty by 2028 fairly easily and exceed our goal set. But the medium to heavy duty, given the market and what's out there and what's being manufactured, we've really set that goal for 2035. And that's been, and it's still pretty ambitious. And I hope that we can even accelerate that with the manufacture of more vehicles coming to market. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so again, CAD advancements, things that we've actually made, that we've been really working on. Again, bringing in renewable diesel was really a big deal here for Port Authority, was to have our chance to get that. EV charger and infrastructure, building out the infrastructure. In my, CAD is obviously working in bringing in the vehicles, but on the other half of my job responsibilities is facility construction, is one of the other areas that I manage, and building in the EV infrastructure. And that's probably it's probably more challenging in a lot of ways than actually the vehicles themselves, is building in the infrastructure. As Scott alluded, there's areas where three-phase power doesn't even exist, and I feel them because I'm having the same challenges. Remote parking areas were never considered, for heavy electrical, power. Most will have some light powers coming in. All our fuel systems were consolidated. You go to the fuel racks, get fueled up, and you move along. So that takes a different way of engineering and laying out your spaces to facilitate charging and where they're parked and how many chargers you can put in a given area. And then you have to manage the fleet. So some of the things that we're considering right now is, okay, you got 30 or 40 vehicles in a parking area, and you may have 15 chargers. So how do you manage who charges and when? What that schedule looks like. So it doesn't become what I like to call the Hunger Games. The guy, the random person that decides it's their charger by their spot, they're going to plug in, and nobody else gets to use the charger but them. And so that everyone has a fair shot, and we're managing the fleet. How do we get, and all the vehicles charged and ready so they can maintain steady use and deployment where they're needed. So PAPD is beginning to, their EV pilots, we've gotten them some Mach-E's they're trying out as part of their fleet program for police. Then it's mechanics training, which is really, a piece where it's still developing, is how to train shop mechanics to really work on our incoming electric vehicles. It requires a different skill set. As ICE engines begin to go out, just retooling our shops to work on electric vehicles and the things that are required. So then mentioned earlier about soy-based products. One of the things that we brought in initially was to bring in the use of soy-based tires, right? So, we working with the soy industry and their leaders, and we were able to bring in some soy-based, tire products, again, reducing carbon emission, carbon footprint. And we're continuing to work with them and continue to search the market to expand on soy-based shop supplies. Again, trying to reduce the use of petroleum-based products everywhere possible. And my favorite here at Port Authority is idle management. Anywhere you got large fleets, everyone likes to idle their cars, trying to mitigate that idling times down to the minimal possible. Again, to reduce carbon output, right? To reduce the amount of fuel burned. Okay, and charge it, and we're finding mobile charging solutions in some of the various areas in the outer layers of the far parts of the airports and some of the more remote areas. Right now, it makes sense to use mobile chargers, but also mobile chargers form a second piece. And that is if we need some emergency power systems and we need to move power from one place to another to facilitate, if we had a power outage, bringing that mobile power solution to another site where there was more critical use vehicles that had to be powered. Because going to electric does pose one risk, And that is, basing everything on a singular fuel source, meaning electric. Electric is very hard to store in volume. So, and then we're looking at some of our renewable, projects we completed. Obviously, I talked about the renewable diesel, the EV chargers, soy-based, and telematics as we're continuing to expand and embrace that technology. Even our PAPD police department is expanding their use of technology, which is a welcome, which is really welcome, because now they're starting to see the true benefits of using the technology that's out there in these vehicles for predictive analysis. So next slide. Okay, so that concludes what I have here for today's presentation. You need to reach out to me. You can reach out to me here at the Port Authority, and I'm here to answer any questions you have at the end of the seminar. Thank you.
Great, Jennifer, thank you. I mean, that's an example of let's say a comprehensive approach with multiple technologies across different aspects of your operations. The bio-based and renewable fuels with the renewable diesel, then also the soy tires, and then the bio-based cleaners and lubricants. And on top of everything else you're doing, that's just a few. Thing I didn't know when we kicked it off, and I don't think anybody, these are the top 3 green fleets for 2024. With our next one up is number 1, Port Authority was number 2, and number 3 was Miami-Dade. Keith Kerman, like I said, largest public fleet in North America. Another fleet is a good number of fleets that embrace technology and that I use as a sounding board, and I learned quite a bit because they're out, testing these technologies out in the real world and telling us what works and what doesn't work. And Keith, all yours, and I know you got quite a bit to go through, and it's all good stuff.
Okay, good to be with you again, Rick, and also with Jennifer, Scott, and John. Good distribution from North Carolina to Miami to New York of the country. I'm Keith Kerman, the Chief Fleet Officer of the City of New York and a Deputy Commissioner at DCAS, Department of Citywide Administrative Services. On behalf of Mayor Eric Adams and our Commissioner Lou Molina, thank you for inviting us to talk a little bit about what we're doing on sustainability. Go to the next slide. You've heard a lot of the components already of what we're doing. To some extent, we just do more of it. Often we do it first. And we have a fairly complex fleet. The 3 major clients of DCAS on the fleet are the New York City Police Department, New York City Fire Department, and the Department of Sanitation. I don't think there's anyone in America who's not familiar with what these agencies are doing. But we serve 57 agencies and offices in total, a little less than 29,000 owned vehicles, add in 10,000 school buses, add in the New York Housing Authority, add in probably a few other 1,000 governmental and related entities that are not technically part of the NYC fleet, but that we support. And it's a big sprawling operation, 190 different types of vehicles, 120 on the on-road side, 70 in the off. In this particular picture, everything's got a plug on it. Everything's got a plug. Next slide. Before I get to the larger vehicles, we also are one of the very few fleets, maybe the only fleet out there that's sold in every toy store in America. So as we get near the holiday season, we have some new offerings. New Mach-E police car, and we're going to show a video about that. Some new fun Parks Department and Sanitation electric trucks. So if you like this presentation, go shop and bring our vehicles home to your families. Next. I'm not going to go through too much of this, otherwise say it's a big operation. We're involved. We have 1,627 full-time staff, another 200 actually who are in transportation. 1,627 is in fleet services and admin. So it's really about an 1,850 person operation. We're going to talk more about it now, but 21,000 plus alternative fuel vehicles, 5,300 EVs, 4,500 hybrids. You already heard from the Port Authority a little bit about renewable diesel, and we're going to talk more about that. 15 million gallons dispensed so far. We're the largest EV charging provider in New York State, the third largest gas station operator in New York State, and it's a large operation. If any week I get to do 10% what is fleet management, that's actually a pretty big industry week. 90% or more of what I do, it could be considered internal management. Sometimes I think of it as foreign policy. And we have a lot of crashes. We're not here to talk about that, but safety is a huge part of what we're doing. On top of the city fleet, the largest school bus program in the world. Next slide. So we have a published NYC Clean Fleet Plan. I think Rick's going to send this all out to you, and all of this is public record. If you go on our website at NYC Fleet at DCAS, we put everything out into the public sphere. We just announced this week, along with the city, our mayor's management report, all our performance indicators are out in the public sphere. We actually report the readiness of our city fleet live every day on the internet under the Mayor's Office of Operation website and the DCAS website. So all we're going to talk to you about here is all available to you. Next slide. Other links, we're under a local law 140 to electrify the whole city fleet by 2035 for light and medium, 2038 for heavy and specialized, if it can be done. And there are aspects like snow plowing, and it's a pretty big aspect that can't be done yet. So the law allows us all kinds of exemptions, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We published with the United States Department of Transportation of Open Center a resource called the Clean Fleet Transition Plan, going through for all 190 types, listed each one of them, what is the reality of electrification, what's out there, what isn't out there. We plan to update this report next year, focusing as well on construction off-road equipment. So next year in 2025, you'll see an update of this report. Next slide. Okay, the basic plan, 3 parts. We think this is the right strategy for everyone in America. Not everyone does, by the way. We do. Replace fossil diesel with biofuels. You heard a little bit from the Port Authority about biofuel, biodiesel, and renewable diesel. I'm going to talk more about it. Implement hybrids and efficiencies. No matter what your propulsion choice, being efficient and being well designed always helps. A smaller electric vehicle still uses less power and is safer, frankly, than a larger electric vehicle. A smaller gas diesel is better, a better designed diesel gas. A hybrid, if you can't do all electric, do hybrid. And we still have a lot of implementation of hybrid, 4,500 plus hybrids, and that'll grow in the police department. And other types of efficiencies like fleet reduction. I'll talk about that more. And then electrify everything you can as soon as we can. We love electrification. We lead with it. We want to electrify, but, you know, and we're doing more than most, but we do recognize it can't be done everywhere. Next slide. At least not yet. So in order, we announced that we would be the first East Coast entity to go to renewable diesel. If you don't know what renewable diesel is, I know it's talked about prior. Renewable diesel is produced from feedstocks. For us, exclusively so far across 15 plus million gallons, it has been used cooking oil and waste animal fats, 2 waste products. We are absolutely willing and have historically for biodiesel used soybean oil, and that totally accept that as a feedstock. It hasn't been part of our renewable diesel mix yet, but could very well be in the future. And then it's renewable diesel, unlike biodiesel. If you've used biodiesel in the past, you know, biodiesel's got some cold weather issues, some material compatibility issues, some underground tank issues, some warranty issues, and it's usually used in 20% or less. We tried to do it at 50% and it worked fine, but it was a rough regulatory road. Renewable diesel is the same spec, 975 is same ASTM as regular diesel. It is regular diesel. And we have permitted it with the fire department. If FDNY will permit something at the underground storage tank and dispenser level, you can get it permitted anywhere. FDNY has the most challenging and difficult issues regulatory because we are one big buildings-oriented, tight, compact city, and the risks here are extraordinary. And yet renewable diesel moving forward everywhere. Next slide. That's just the status of our rollout, over 15 million gallons. We're going to be making some public announcements about renewable diesel in the fleet and in other areas in the next few weeks. I won't jump my own announcements, but look forward to that. Every single agency is using renewable diesel right now. We did the whole winter with sanitation and plowing 2 storms, all on renewable diesel. Next slide. And I should mention, that's 100% switching. We, in fact, use RD95 B5. We don't use fossil fuel. The only fossil fuel left being used is when some ambulances and police cars need to use retail for logistical purposes. We allow that. It's about 5% of the fuel use. Other than that, our whole program is now RD 100%. We used it in the winter. We did not think this would be possible. You know, we're so used to biodiesel in the winter, cold weather issues. and we usually would go from 20% to 5%. We didn't think we would be able to use it in the winter, at least not in the way we did. We were able to implement something called an Arctic blend, a more re-refined renewable diesel, few pennies on the dollar, wasn't a huge issue. Worked great, met our cloud point spec of -19, and no issues at all. And the whole winter, 100% for all the major plowing agencies. Next. On the environmental side, why bother? Because it's 60% greenhouse gas reduction on the production side and the feedstock side, and about 15 to 35% on the air quality side. And those are some resources on both of those, both coming out of California, which is the major user of renewable diesel. Over 60% of all fuel in the state of California, public and private, the whole state, fifth largest economy in the world, is renewable diesel today, and they expect 100% of it by 2030. Is zero emission better than this? For sure. But we can't get to zero emission on a lot of the trucking and specialized equipment side. I also remind you that even electric vehicles are not really zero emission. They're zero emission at the car level. They're not zero emission in the production level. So we think this is where you can't electrify, pretty important and something that could be used for a lot of years, decades, as we work toward a better zero emission future. Next. One fascinating thing about renewable diesel you might not know, it doesn't smell. I've joked internally that you could argue the entire initiative just in the fact we've removed the gross diesel fuel smell from garages and facilities. The aromatics are disappeared on the fuel. We have that little test. If you come to my office, visit us in the municipal building at City Hall, we'll let you do that test. And you probably shouldn't be smelling any fuel, but if you smell the fossil diesel, it stinks. You smell the renewable diesel, you don't smell anything. And pretty remarkable, and our sanitation and other agencies have appreciated. And I asked Anthony if I could use this quote of his publicly, and he said sure. And it's really been a remarkable thing. Next. So California leads the way in this because they have something called low carbon fuel standard. So does the state of Oregon, the state of Washington. It's been introduced in New Jersey, introduced in New York. I think recently passed, I want to say New Mexico. It essentially creates a carbon market to incentivize not just renewable diesel, but also electrification. And it's a big part of how California is pushing forward on both and leading in both. So we're trying to get some progress on this in New York State. Next. We have a case study on that, so you'll have the link. Feel free to check that out. Next. Okay, so that's renewable diesel, renewable fuel. I really think you should take a look at it. We introduced it to New York State, frankly, to the whole East Coast of the United States. Port Authority is using it now. But what's interesting, a lot of others are using it now. It's kind of growing, and it has its own, our Argus has established a renewable diesel index, a daily reporting on renewable diesel prices out of the harbor. That alone is an enormous representation that it's starting to get some buzz and some momentum. All right, next thing is efficiency. Everything you can do should be most efficient. You heard a little bit about fleet tracking. Next slide. So we do our own fleet tracking. In telematics, we track 29,000 vehicles live. Under Mayor Adams, we were asked to reduce the fleet. So what's the most fuel efficient vehicle? One you do not operate. And we've cut over 2,000 vehicles from the city fleet, about 4% through telematics. Next slide. That's just a fun representation of our telematics. I tend to joke with people that you can't walk 2 blocks in New York City without seeing a fleet vehicle. I cannot prove that you can't walk 2 blocks in New York City without seeing a fleet vehicle. But outside of what GSA is doing in the federal level, and we've been partnering with them, this is the largest live tracking program for vehicles in the country. Next. Can't go through all of it for time, but we are using the efficiencies on a lot of fronts: fuel reduction, maintenance cost reduction, expanding electric vehicle use, fleet reduction. So that efficiency program, hugely important to what we're trying to do. And whether you're EV, whether you're biofuels, whether you're hybrids, efficiency, smaller is always better, more efficient, always better, better designed, always better. Next. Just want to mention hybrids are still a huge part of our strategy. Every ambulance in the city of New York is actually a version of a plug-in hybrid with an alternative power unit that can be plugged in. It's hard to plug them in though, because of the operations. When do you plug in and not interrupt the EMT? We still have a lot of hybrid garbage trucks as we move to electric. Policing will, we're working on electric. I'm going to show you that, but we're still implementing hybrids, and we really love to see a plug-in hybrid police option because the charging and the backup power issues are pretty big. For me, almost the whole city fleet is emergency services. And so backup power becomes a big issue as you electrify. Next. All right, so the final piece of the puzzle is electrification. And I think we're going to lead and show you a video. The largest single component of the New York City fleet is law enforcement, not just at NYPD, at other agencies. So electrifying law enforcement, if we're going to electrify the whole city fleet, that's got to be where it happens. And kick it off. Not sure if you can hear the sound.
That originates to the 19th century with the color of their uniforms. But here in New York, there's a new push for the NYPD to go green. Here's Chris Van Cleve.
Across New York City, the NYPD is going electric, adding nearly 200 Ford Mach-E's to patrol the streets, the nation's largest deployment of EVs as police cruisers. Do you feel like this is just as capable of a police car as a gas-powered car?
I do, yeah. I think it drives just as good, if not better in some ways, than the gas-powered cars.
You're convinced that this has a future in policing?
I am, yes.
The NYPD has been going green for years. Starting in 2009, the department tried out modified civilian hybrids, then lobbied for it to make a true hybrid police car. Those units are about 40% more fuel efficient, saving 700 gallons of gas per year per vehicle. Now this pilot project takes civilian EVs and retrofits them for police work.
As we make this big move to electrification, law enforcement is going to be front and center.
New York City's chief fleet officer, Keith Kerman, is overseeing the addition of 1,000 new EVs a year. You don't drive a police car the way you drive most normal fleet vehicles.
Absolutely. New York City's trying to and going to electrify in probably the toughest place to do it. Emergency services, law enforcement, sanitation, snow removal. And it's going to have challenges.
The NYPD test program is aimed at identifying some of those challenges and places where improvements can be made.
Our goal now is to gain as much data as we can to hopefully one day introduce these as 100% electric vehicles down the road.
Ford, the largest maker of police cars, expects that transition to be gradual.
It will be a slower progression to electric than it is for, a retail customer to adjust to, just because the vehicle is used for a police officer in a much different way.
The Mach-E has more horsepower, more torque, more advanced safety features, a faster 0 to 60 time, and faster braking than any other vehicle in the NYPD fleet, something we experienced firsthand on the department's test track. Perhaps a preview of policing's electric future. Chris Van Cleve, CBS News, New York.
He was never supposed to drive that vehicle.
This morning, we are going behind the wheel of one of the new.
If you can go back up just a few more slides, but he was never supposed to drive that vehicle. I don't know how they did. But it was a good piece. So, I will say as we try and get back up the slides, we made our next. We'll announce it a little later in the game, but we made some more progress on electrification and law enforcement across all our city agencies just yesterday, and some work that we're doing with our office and management budget. So I think we're trying to get back to my deck, and I can just preview it though. So we have about 5,300 electric vehicles at this point. Throughout the city agencies, we've made a big move into pickups and vans. 25% of our fleet is pickups and vans. 3 years ago, I told you we had no electric vehicles. We now have over 500 and new orders being put in place right now. So that's incredibly important. Still have that problem is we don't have a plow truck. Even the pickups can't plow. We don't have a gator that can plow, and we certainly don't have a sanitation truck that can plow. And as you may know, New York City plows with sanitation trucks. So that's a big limiter for us, partly why we're using renewable diesel in the meantime. Charging, hugely important. You heard a little bit about that already. We operate the largest charging network in New York State, 2,100 chargers and growing. 313 or so fast chargers. We're trying to build that up, the speed up to it. Really involved and complicated stuff. Our Assistant Commissioner Brent Taylor, who you all might know, is a longtime fleet professional and has kind of become an electric charging professional. I think he spends more time on electric charging now than he does on fleet operations, just because we got to roll this out if we're going to do this whole electrical initiative and program. I have a slide, which I guess you'll see. I don't know if we're going to get back up, but we also are doing a lot of training under Local Law 140. We are required to train our mechanics, to train our fleet operators in EV. We have a training initiative called Let's Talk About EV, which is public. You're welcome to see it. It's all on the internet. And of course, we have the local law. Mayor Adams signed a local law in October 2023 that we would go to an all-electric fleet by 2035 for light and medium, 2038 for heavy, but it has exceptions. The law can't make you do what you can't do. So until there are fire trucks to the New York City spec, until there are plow trucks anywhere on the planet, and the backup power and the rest, we have the flexibility in the law to do plug-in hybrids. We have the flexibility in the law to do renewable diesel, until electric is there. So the law absolutely sets the ambition. We want zero emissions, but this is a realistic law that also provides enough flexibility that you aren't being asked to do which isn't available to do. We cannot electrify waste operation, plowing operations until there is a plow truck out there that's viable and the charging and backup power that goes with it. So in the law, we work in partnership with the City Council to reflect that. Next slide. I think I probably talked about everything else. So yeah, this is our growth in electric, going great. Doing another set of orders as we speak. Next slide. The charging, just some pictures. We do a solar carport program for resiliency, for backup power. We are our own energy provider at 159 solar sites now, and those are off the grid. They're completely off the grid, completely freestanding. Next, and that's the training initiative that I mentioned, and that's all out in the public eye. Next, I think that's it. So, and this is our future orientation. Yeah, just threw it in because it's from this weekend. So if you're in my if you're any of my children, you have to take pictures with New York City electric cars to get through the day. So with that, thank you very much.
Great, Keith, thanks. And you said at least 3 times, do what you can do, put what works in. You mentioned hybrids, and that's a thing we saw in the Green Fleet Awards. A number of public safety have embraced the hybrids, and it's an idle reduction technology, and those vehicles notoriously spend way over half their time sitting at idle. I'm not going to put a hard number on it because it varies by about 10 or 20%, depending on the organization. So hybrids, they have an impact without a doubt, and the technology's there, and there are options. So appreciate the comprehensive. We're going to go ahead now. We're going to open the floor up to questions. So ask all the panelists to come join us with your faces once again. And see what we have coming in. I guess, Keith, I'll leave you leave you live on a mic and maybe a little bit on a hotspot. Can you give us a little bit of an overview? You talk about you have 5,000 plus vehicles with plugs. You have over 2,000 chargers. Just an overview of the types of chargers, some of the things you've done regarding resiliency and to meet needs. And not everything is a DC fast charger, but you have that in the mix as well.
Yeah, so for a long time we didn't do fast chargers. It really only been 3 to 4 years because our duty cycle didn't require them. And we were always meeting with vendors. Why aren't you doing fast chargers? And the answer is because all the electric vehicles we had at that point were 1-shift vehicles. Right? If you have a light duty vehicle, even in early vans, and they're just working 1 shift and they're going to park all night, then charge them overnight. Why are you spending an extra? My average level 2 charger costs about $5,000 to $6,000, and our average fast charger costs $100,000. So why am I spending an extra $95,000 when I don't have to? As we got into PD, right? As we now have, it's not just the Mach-E's at police. We have law enforcement electrics all over all our agencies. We have 9 different agencies that have law enforcement components. As we got into the vans and the early trucks, we had to have fast charging. Frankly, as we got into vehicles in downtown Brooklyn and lower Manhattan, where you just don't have parking, you have to fast charge because there's no park. You don't get parking there. A lot of these are commuters. So now we have the fast charging 313. Most of it's 50 kilowatt. We are slowly making the jump to 150 kilowatt. And I'll tell you the cautionaries. Our first 150 kilowatt charging option was FreeWire. And, you know, we like the FreeWire product, the whole power battery thing. You know, I don't know what any of you are doing in your lives. You all seem like lovely people. I have no idea what happens when this film is off. And I guess what? I guess I didn't know what was happening at FreeWire because obviously FreeWire is no longer available as a company and went bankrupt. And so, you know, charging is a new industry and affects us too. And in developing. The other one I just mentioned is solar carports. We use a product, which is a Beam product. And, you know, we have 159 of them now. We just got a federal grant to expand. We don't know who that'll be with, but we just got a federal grant to expand that project thanks to USDOT. And that's all about resiliency, you know, answering the question, what happens when the lights go off? What happens when you have your next big hurricane, which we could have any week right now, or your snowstorm, the first hour starts with a blackout. As we become dependent on electric, we're going to need to have diesel generation capacity. A lot of our fast charging setups are now being set up to accept diesel generators as backup. You know, battery storage, the solar capacity, and plug-in hybrids, and that option of plug-in hybrids.
You know, Keith, and it's mentioned, you know, in terms of driving efficiency, and this one's more towards Scott. You folks did a route analysis for your transit. Can you talk about that and what came out of it in terms of, you know, vehicle count reduction and environmental impact?
Oh, that's a good one. So yeah, the Department of Transit and Public Works here, I guess this was 4 or 5 years ago, did a full scale route analysis on all of their bus routes, every single one, as they were going from diesel to compressed natural gas with the focus on eventually electrifying 50% of the bus fleet. That's the goal by I think it's 2040. I want to say either 2038 or 2040, they want 50% of their bus fleet to be electric. Well, here in Miami-Dade County, they have long route runs. So what they did is they re-looked at all their routes. They looked at their ridership. They did a full-scale analysis on who was riding when, how long, how far, and rerouted the whole thing. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty here, but what they found was there were opportunities to shorten routes. There are opportunities to cut routes and still not impact ridership or accessibility for especially some of the, you know, the areas of our county that need you know, bus routes. They need it. We don't have a great rail system. It's getting better, but it's not a great rail system. So bus routes to the rail were where they focused. That was the big key. Is they had a lot of bus routes that weren't going anywhere near a rail route. They found areas where they could improve that, shorten routes, reduce their bus fleet, so it's less vehicles on the road, go from diesel to CNG, and now they're doing CNG to electric, with 100 electric buses in the next 3 years. They're building a facility right now, specifically for those buses. And they will run a corridor route where they're putting the infrastructure in. That's a fast bus corridor route to connect our furthest south site to our furthest north site. It's a speed route with DC fast charging stations that are in ground. I'm not completely 100% briefed up on how this works, but I'm seeing them be erected. It's a pretty neat project where these buses can run these long routes with charging as they go. It's a pretty neat thing, all articulated buses. They think it's going to reduce their overall emissions in the next 4 years by 50%. That's what they're looking at, which is significant.
Right. Now, that's, a good story. I mean, doing what you do now, long-term planning, and then the impact. I mean, I did read your application this morning, so there was a little bit of a loaded question. In that route optimization, you guys eliminated 178
Yep.
buses.
178.
That was, I remember the
Huge.
first time I read it, I remember, the end this morning, and then your diesel usage.
Oh, that's, yeah. They literally, they have 40 buses, 40 diesel buses left in their fleet from
Yeah.
570, what was it? 578. They're down to 40 diesel buses in their fleet.
Right.
They went from 13 million gallons of diesel a year to, I think last year it was, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was insignificant.
No, use of data, use of technology. I mean, something
It's
that we've been
crazy.
beating the drum all day.
Yeah.
It came up briefly, and I think everybody has vehicles in this, and I'm sure you've addressed this. What are some of the issues with take-home EVs, and how are you handling that?
We haven't addressed that one yet down here. That's
Okay.
still a work in progress.
And
Uh,
anybody else got
It's
something
a
to say
real,
about that?
it's a real challenge. We have a lot of vehicles that are operated down in downtown Brooklyn and lower Manhattan, like I mentioned earlier. Two particular agencies, our construction, without getting the names, two of our big construction agencies, and almost everyone commutes. And so, it is a big challenge. Historically, I have worked over 30 years to always separate public and private assets. I don't like to have any conjoining of our fleet resources and your personal life. However, I have actually met with a couple vendors recently on the topic of metering at homes for charging. And both agencies have said to us, they'll stop commuting and they'll do electric cars. You find us space in the city to park and charge. And, it's a good offer to give me because, finding space in the city of New York is not easy and very expensive. And so, it's a challenge as relates to commuting. I will tell you that enormous number of our commuters are in electric vehicles. And we have Executive Order 90, which requires senior executives throughout the government, unless exempted by DCAS for law enforcement purposes or emergency purposes, to be in electric models. And we're almost completely there. So most senior executives in New York City government, except where there are police or emergency response issues, are already in EVs. So we've made a lot of progress. But I won't deny, especially with two big buildings related agencies that are all located in lower Manhattan, downtown Brooklyn, it's been a little bit of a challenge. And we have basically like 650, 700 vehicles that we are trying to figure out how to get them electrified while they still are mostly commuting. And so we're looking at all kinds of options, more fast charging in those areas, and also whether these type of metering services are realistic.
Great. And we talked about the costs of some of these technologies and, how to pay for them. I mean, what are some of the funding opportunities that you've taken advantage at the local level and the federal level, some of the stuff that's out there? They keep talking about all this money that's pouring in. Sometimes it's a mystery on where and how to get it. Any of you folks?
Well, down here in Miami-Dade, we are continuing looking at any grant opportunities, especially in the transit and public works side. On the transit side, there are large federal grants out there that we've taken advantage of to help do this electrification initiative. Even the compressed natural gas initiative to put those sites in was all grant funded. Those are huge opportunities when these federal grants are available. If you have this someone that's dedicated to kind of keep an eye out on that and become an expert in doing those applications, because they're not easy. But you take that initiative, you assign someone to it, give them the resources they need, and go get the money. You have to, or else you'll never get there if you're just looking at your own budget. That's a difficult thing. I don't know about the others, but for us, it was state and local and federal grant opportunities really started getting things going. And then once everybody sees the benefit of it and they start getting that buy-in, then your budget and finance can get involved and you can start doing your replacement plan there. Because right now the EV prices are coming down. They're still more expensive than ICE, but they're coming down. We're starting to see it go over that little hump. It's not where I'd like it to be yet, but it's getting there. And at some point, you just have to bite the bullet and say, all right, maybe I'm buying 3 or 4 less cars for my particular section this year so I can start the electrification thing.
All right, good, thanks.
On the
Amy?
truck side, the biggest gap is in trucks. We believe and we have published that there is a real ROI on medium and light. And those they're increments, but they're not awful. They're manageable and they will pay for themselves. The big thing is the trucks, where you might be adding $200,000 onto a $150,000 truck. And that is formidable. There are people who claim you'll make up that money. You won't in a municipal operation like ours, like the Port Authority. Maybe if you're in a tractor trailer operation and you're running 40,000 miles a year, you aren't going to do it in the kind of municipal world and the way we operate. What I will say is we did put in, if there's anyone from federal DEP, we did put in for the heavy duty EV grants for 55 trucks. We're hoping to hear about that in late November, early December. Hoping that our federal government is still pursuing such investments come late November, early December, and for many, many years after that. And so, that's actually, I think, more than any other sphere in the trucking side where that federal support is really needed. The medium, we're doing the EV tax credit, we're doing some other grant programs, but there's an argument on the medium and light straight up. Very, very challenging. We need that support on the trucking side.
All right, good. So here's one, we talked about some of the challenges of, just being availability of the right equipment to do the job. I mean, are you working with, or what can we do to guide the industry and the OEMs to give products that you guys would buy if they were available? And I know they had the big three had an electric consortium that I know New York City and Orlando participated in. On what they wanted out of an electric vehicle for your fleet vehicles. David Dunn was on it, and Bob Martinez. Those were two of the folks I knew were on those OEM ones. Is there anything else in terms of voice of the customer to get them to move to some technology?
Well, I actually think it would come. It's not just the individuals like, the DCAS and Port Authority and, Scott Down in Florida, but really it's the organizations such as NAFA, right? How do we leverage lobbying power as a group to discuss those options with, with the manufacturing groups on what they can engineer and bring in. I mean, when you start talking as together, if you put the 3 fleets of just me, Scott, and Keith together, it's a buying segment, right? That should be able to drive any market, right? And when you're and start bringing the engineers in or senior executives into those NAFA events and saying and letting them listen firsthand or lobbying them firsthand about that. That's one of the that's one of the strengths of these industry organizations, is then using the membership leveraging power and using that membership and saying, oh, here we are as here's how many representative fleets we are, and this is what we're looking for, right? How would you service this market? These are the things that we're looking for. Sometimes the engineers don't purpose build enough vehicles. A lot of the vehicles are all made for a civilian function first and foremost, and then later adapted into, commercial application, specialized application, even the police vehicles, right? We're using Ford Mach-E's, which were not intended to be primarily police type vehicles. And we're trying, we're saying, well, it's, trying to fit them out to be police vehicles. But, Ford, if they listened about modification of the manufacturing process, the interiors of the vehicles, and or, size and capability, or battery construct to meet certain charging profiles, that in turn, should come from us, right? As an organization, as a consortium, as the organization using our combined leverage, and then bringing people in to, to hear us speak or hear us as a group to drive the industry. Because the second half of this, the other side of this coin, really is not just the vehicle driving it too, but there is also the safety standards in between, the concerns of batteries, battery fires, which in high density urban environments can wreak havoc. For me, we're studying, with our internal fire department, because we got bridges and tunnels. We have TB&T, we have firefighters for vehicle fires, is studying the impacts of battery fires or vehicle fires and what that would be like. So what I say is, what safety systems can they put internally in batteries that if there were to be some sort of ignition event or thermal event that would, that would inject the battery, so to speak, and put it out, it's the safety items, right? So it's like discussing it with and using and leveraging this organization in a larger capacity. So the question becomes, what could the organization think it could do to really unite all the forces of all the various organizations in a singular voice to say, hey, this is what we need. We want to be in front of this, and we want to be able to drive the entire United States in our various areas into an electrification, into a zero emission, but we need your help, and we need it in these areas to make these specific vehicles, or to start working in that medium segment, because that's where, that's where the lagger is in the market. And that would be my take on it, right? It's, it's not what any individual can do, but it's really the group voice. And these organizations, to me, would really benefit, all of us so much, is just to be able to lobby back to the industry and bring them in and drive the consortium.
Right. Now that the consortium, and call it buying power, is a great point, a great idea. We've seen it done with fueling up in the Pacific Northwest. 10 years ago, a group of utilities got together and they've had a steady stream of renewable diesel with significant impact for 10 years.
Yeah, it's, if we started to see, if you had Chevy and you had Ford and, Chrysler all together, and you say, whoever buys, could build this purpose-built police car or purpose-built vehicle X, we would all be interested in buying that vehicle. They're talking about, a buying segment, right? As as an opportunity, and I think that's really where it's at. None of the vehicles are really truly purpose-built for the municipal capacities that we're trying to put some of them into, especially in the light duties phase, right? That's, we're trying to convert civilian use cars, sport utility vehicles that were, never really engineered from its design standpoints to do the type of things necessarily we're trying to do. We're trying to modify and adapt vehicles that were never purpose-built for the intended use that we're putting them in. And that also goes, this all plays into, longevity, right? The vehicles were, that were designed, they weren't designed to be used under sometimes the heaviest conditions. This is, like for me and Keith, we're in New York City, if it's not going to hold up, we're going to tell you really fast, and it's going to be all crumpled up. We're going to throw it back at you, because it's not like we don't, it's, because up here, Keith can attest, we have the smoothest roads here in the world up here. There's no lumps and bumps in our road. And, the challenges of just idling and traffic and, and roads, and just the way we use vehicles are different. And I think purpose-built vehicles to, to satisfy, the actual needs, and that would drive the market. Sometimes I think the civilian market then would follow and be behind some of those innovations that we would make in a commercial segment.
Okay. Scott, you talked about the prices coming down. And I guess this is to everyone, but as we approach price parity, I guess what is your decision criteria on what vehicle you're going to use? A hybrid, a conventional fuel vehicle, or an EV, or is it just hands down go with an EV? Take the price difference out of the equation.
Well, I mean, if you're going to not talk price and you're going to talk what's best, what's your focus? Is your focus on your budget or is your focus on your environment? We're talking about sustainability.
Mhm.
So for us, at least here, and I believe at DCAS and I believe at the Port Authority, they're going to say the same thing. I can buy an ICE vehicle and let's say it's the same price as an EV. Why would I buy ICE? I would buy an EV. I don't want to be living on a floating house down here in Miami-Dade County in 50 years. You know, I don't want that for my children or my grandchildren. I don't want to see that. So if I can do anything now to get the environment somewhat cleaner so that Mother Nature can do what she wants to do and maybe improve things, I'm gonna buy an EV. But if I have an application that where an EV doesn't fit and there's a hybrid, I'm gonna buy a hybrid. And last ditch case will be an ICE. And that's how we approach it here. That's our mandate. That's our plan. We just had an argument with a department fleet director this morning wanting to buy an ICE vehicle when there was a hybrid available. We flat out said, this isn't going to get by us. We're not sending this up to the mayor. What are you, crazy? No, you're buying a hybrid. I don't want to spend the money. You're spending the money. You don't have a choice. I think that's the approach you have to take. And maybe I'm being a little crass about it, but I think that's where we're at right now as an industry, you know?
It's not a cost saving strategy, right? And that's the beginning piece of it. You know, when you're looking at when you're looking at the, you know, doing what, like you said, in perfect speech, you know, we're looking at, talking about what's doing great for the greater good and the greater environment and the long-term success of our environment. It doesn't make it the best business, business deal. It's, you know, it's gonna have a higher cost, but again, there's a higher savings in the long term. You know, and it's just until the industry levels and matures further, you know, then you'll start eventually to see, you know, costs levelize. I don't know if they'll ever be equal to, but I think they'll levelize. You know, you'll start to see stabilization in the cost as manufacturers can then, you know, build up and start to build through, you know, the EV issues and being able to build strong supply lines. And you'll start to see it stabilize, but it'll be a different cost. There will be a higher cost just because of the construct of the batteries and the resources used are more expensive. So.
Well, you know, Keith mentioned it, and we've talked about this in other forums. I mean, you know, looking at total cost of ownership, your operating costs, your maintenance costs are lower on EVs for the most part, and you know, the more you use them. And Keith mentioned in his light duty, the business case is there in some of their applications.
Oh, it's a medium duty, actually, not emergency. And so I think light and medium, you can make the case straight up on cost and environment. I will just qualify one thing though for us. In the non-emergency side, yeah, if there's a viable electric, that's what we're doing. In fact, that's what we're now required to do by law. In the emergency services side, there are more issues, right? So you have the charging and backup power issues. And, you know, for us, that's a big thing, right? If it's not an academic question to say, what happens if the power goes out? And you have a police force, a fire force, an ambulance force, and a sanitation force that's all electric. You cannot put them on the clock. You can't say, well, ambulance services will shut down 8 hours unless Con Ed gets the power back. And then in the winter side, you know, just for fun reinforcement, if sanitation trucks were all electric, then they would need Con Ed power to do their jobs. They plow the streets. If there was a snowstorm, Con Ed would need sanitation to plow the streets so they could restore the power. So which is it going to be? So these backup issues are real issues. And you know, I as I push electrification in mostly emergency services, not everybody, but you know, almost everybody I serve is an emergency provider, and some are some of the biggest emergency providers in the United States. This is a very practical issue. One of the things, talking about custom built vehicles, get me a plug-in hybrid police car, and I will buy every single police car will be a plug-in hybrid first. You know, electric is trickier. If you've ever been to a police precinct, you know, they're very space constrained places. We're battling on parking and space for police cars every day in the city of New York. Now where the charger's going. And then that backup power issue is a real thing. It's not, I've been through 2 major power loss events in the emergency side of my job. The major blackout, I want to say 2003, 4, and then of course Hurricane Sandy. These aren't theoretical issues, and the amount of pressure and issues you're dealing with during these events are enormous. These are events where lives are at risk in every minute. You can't play with that. You have to have a backup power plan if you're doing EV. So plug-in hybrid. I'll tell you what we do with the Department of Sanitation really quickly. We have 1,000 vehicles at the Department of Sanitation Emergency Response Agency, 1,000 light and medium. Everyone's going to have a plug. About half of them are going to be all electric because they can be, and about half of them, especially the snow supervisors, the utilities, the 4x4s that do the snow events, they're going to be plug-in hybrids and probably be completely done next 2 to 3 years. So everything will have a plug during most days of the year. You'll have 0 emissions, but for the assets that are most storm critical, you're going to have some redundancy. You're going to have the gas option if you need.
All right, we're pretty much at time, but I want to throw one more out there so we can get a quick soundbite or something. So any recommendation or advice for smaller fleets that may not have some of the budget power that you folks have? Where do they start? How do you get in the game? How do you drive efficiency and become more sustainable?
Well, I'll start. And then first, I think telematics implementation, even for a small fleet, will help save you money. Understanding what your fleet is doing, what you really need, how you deploy it, even for 20, 30, 40, 100 vehicle fleet, I think makes a lot of sense. 2, you start with hybrids. Hybrids are good. If you're saving 30 to 40%, you don't on fuel and reducing maintenance. These hybrids are much better on maintenance, much better on resiliency, hot weather issues. You don't have the same kind of overheating issues with hybrids that we have with a lot of gas vehicles. You don't have to do the infrastructure. That's how you get going. By the way, that's how we got going. So how can we say you can't start with a hybrid? We were doing hybrids. We were the very first adopters of the Prius, and we now operate 3,000 of them. And so, hybrids is how we started. And if you haven't begun yet, and you can't figure out EV quite yet, get going on hybrid. You won't pay much on increment at all, and you'll save money, and it'll be a good way to get going. Or then you do the light duty non-emergency EVs is the other place. That's the other low hanging fruit to get going.
And look at alternate fuels like biofuels.
Right.
If they're in your market, right? If you're not changing any existing equipment while you decide how you're going to buy, or if your vehicles still have, especially in the diesel classes, they still have plenty of service life. They're not up for replacement in the next 5 years, but what can we do now? And that's the question that I had posed to and here was, what can we do now, right? And that was the implementation of biofuel and that, or renewable diesel, and that was the ability to then get an emission, lower emission without really any changes to the fleet itself. So it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it has to be. Diversify. Keith is right, Jennifer's right. Diversify. I started off my little presentation with that. We all talk of EV, but sustainability is not just electrification. Sustainability is everything.
Right.
Anything that you can do. I wholeheartedly agree with the telematic piece. And track. Whatever you do, track. Arm yourself, because when you go to ask for more money and you can show cost savings and they don't take your budget from you, if you're saving $100,000 this year from implementing less idling or some new thing, that's money towards whatever you want to do next. Track it.
Well, great. We're at time, in fact, a few minutes beyond. I want to thank everybody for joining us, as well as our panel of experts here. You're doing great work out there. Keep it up. I enjoy participating in this, and in the Green Fleet Awards, I get to see what fleets across the country are doing, and get excited about the creativity and the impact and stuff that's going on. Great to be here. I'm just glad you asked me to come back and join come out of retirement to do another webinar. I think we'll call it a day. And
that sounds great.
Good day all.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks to all our presenters and our sponsor for today. And thank you for our audience for joining. If you think of a question that you didn't ask today, you can send it to the NAPA team at info@napa.org and we will direct it to where it needs to go. This concludes our webinar and we thank you all again. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, good day. Thank you.
Thanks very much, friends.